Federal Workforce Fallout is sponsored by Prince George's Community College.
You're watching Federal Workforce Fallout, where each week we break down the impacts to our neighbors and the federal workforce. Thanks for joining us. I'm Larry Miller. Well, this show is dedicated to the reduction of the federal workforce and the impact that it's having on workers, their families, and our local and national economy. Well, it's been a little more than a year since the Trump administration began making major changes to the federal workforce, from layoffs to lawsuits. The administration has been moving forward with policies they say are important to making the federal government more efficient. But not everyone agrees that the changes implemented so far have made the federal workforce more effective. In fact, union leaders and workers inside of several federal agencies say that the changes to the workforce could be far-reaching and result in long-term implications for the American people. Well, this week we're speaking with Dr. Vanessa Weaver, CEO of Alignment Strategies. We're also speaking with Anthony Lee. He's the president of NETU, Chapter 282. It's the union representing close to 9,000 employees at the Food and Drug Administration. Mr. Lee spoke to us in his capacity as a union representative, not as an FDA employee. And Elisa Tafty is the co-executive director of Branch 4.
So it's been a year since we've seen dramatic changes take place in the federal workforce, from the about 300,000 plus that have left through various programs, to some of the policy changes that we're seeing now, even with OPM wanting to change how appeals take place for those agencies that are interested in moving forward with RIFs. I think from your perspective, clearly you're sort of boots on the ground representing federal workers in every capacity. I want you to sort of reflect on the year for us. How has it been going, and where do you see things going from here?
So right now, federal employees are pretty much in, or feeling like they're in a sense of legal limbo. And to somewhat explain that, there was a DC Circuit Court hearing on December the 15th. We're waiting for that decision to come back from the judges. And if it does go in the union's favor, it would go a long way towards restoring, if only temporary, the rights that employees have lost. It was actually a ruling, or I'm sorry, a hearing on the injunctions that unions won at the lower court level. So and a lot of employees are anxiously waiting for that, wondering why it's taking so long. And the related case to that, it was in the DC District Court. That judge has said that he will wait until the DC Circuit has ruled before he makes a decision on the underlying issue of, is the executive order illegal or not. So employers are just feeling like right now they're on this roller coaster of multiple court cases, wins, and then having to appeal losses and things of that nature. But as you mentioned, OPM sending out a lot of different regulations that would change the way that the workplace operates has also caused a lot of anxiety for employees, in the sense that they could essentially be fired just for doing their jobs because of some of these new regulations, like the Schedule PC regulation.
Yeah. And in terms of what this contributes to the sort of climate that we're seeing right now, is it one in which you feel that federal workers currently are sort of on edge, given the changes that we've seen over the last year and sort of the proposed policy changes that OPM is trying to move through?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, federal employees are on edge. There's a huge sense of uncertainty of whether or not they're going to come into work one day and simply be fired for doing their jobs, for telling the truth, for at the agency where I work, and for following the data, the evidence, the science, and rendering a recommendation based on that. And if it doesn't go in alignment with the administration's view of how something should go, then employees are concerned that they would be on the end of being fired simply for that, or feeling that kind of political retaliation.
Elisa, there was also issues about collective bargaining as well, and that was something that the administration really has sort of zeroed in on, something that they wanted to, I think, for lack of a better word, dismantle. Maybe that probably does accurately reflect sort of the actions. Where do we stand right now? I know that there were certainly some challenges that were working its way through the courts.
Yeah, they are attacking on many different fronts. So the executive orders is one front that they've used to attack the collective bargaining rights for federal workers. The courts are, I think, like Anthony said, it's a bit of a morass. It's murky. We don't really know where things, how they're going to come out. Some of the cases have injunctions, some don't. And we're having to sort of wait and see. But at the same time, agencies have been given free rein by the administration through those actions like the executive orders. So you're seeing different levels of attacks on unions and union officers as a result of that. So we're seeing union officers being targeted. So the attempt to dismantle sort of collective bargaining isn't just at that higher level of the executive orders in the courts. It's happening at a day-to-day individual level also at the agencies.
Hmm. It's sort of when I talk with other federal workers, they describe for me sort of this sort of ongoing chaos that they feel that there's so many things that are in limbo right now in the courts, and that there's so many changes that seem to be coming up in the pipeline that they really just don't know where to turn. Does the unions, as you guys have certainly worked with them now, does there appear to be a clear strategy in sort of how to deal with this? Because there seem to be fires on all fronts.
That's very well put. There are fires on all fronts, and the unions are doing their best to respond on all different fronts. It is a one of the key things I think here is that the federal workers who have been the committed public servants who have been showing up every day and doing the work. A lot of this, they have a lot of power and they have a lot of ability to work together to be able to speak out. It's important for us to speak out. It's also important for the public to be hearing these things. There's so many things going on that these individual stories really get drowned out, and there's just a constant stream of these stories. So we need help with not just the unions. It really has to be broader, other groups and communities to be really talking about what happens when this agency gets dismantled and how does it impact us.
And does there appear to be that sort of coalition from other outside groups as opposed to just the unions? I mean, we see the unions firmly on the fight. Um, I'm sort of thinking about some past rallies that I've attended with federal workers and even those on Capitol Hill. Very rarely do you see other outside groups sort of standing up for federal workers. Is that something that you're seeing?
I would
Yeah.
just say that it's not just federal sector unions. I mean, we are working with private sector unions as well, building that coalition. That's what the Federal Unionist Network is about, that I belong to, that Elisa belongs to. And we're bringing everyone together for the fight. But to go back to something you said earlier, I did want to also say it's not just in the courts, right? It's a multi-pronged approach where just a couple of weeks ago, some federal sector unions were up on Capitol Hill. My union, the National Treasury Employees Union, will be on the Hill the first week of March, talking to congressmen in the House, talking to senators about them exerting their equal authority as an equal branch of government, them standing up for federal employees, educating them on what's actually happening in more granular detail in these agencies, and making sure that they do things like hold hearings or hold agency officials accountable so that we can try to push back on some of this. And then we're doing interviews like this and in other forms to try to get the word out to the public so they understand why they should care about what this administration is doing to our federal government.
I would also add, I think there are a lot of communities that are out speaking out, but I think it's really difficult to know how people can do that, and I think there's a lot of fear. People are seeing different groups being sort of attacked and being targeted when they do speak out. Some of the larger actors are sort of they're kind of caving to some of this pressure, and so it's making it harder for different groups to speak out. But that I have been seeing a number of people stepping up and really doing the work to try to understand how does this impact us and show their constituency how it does impact them. But that takes more work. It takes more time when the goalposts are constantly getting moved, which makes it really difficult to focus on and spend enough time on any one of the different topics and the issues that are arising. And then people need cover and they need protection, and that is hard to find right now.
Dr. Weaver, let's kind of chat with you a little bit about this.
Yeah.
I'm imagining, sort of given the climate that we've described, and sort of the ongoing fights that are sort of continuing to work themselves out in whatever degree in which they are, I'd imagine that this kind of creates a sort of climate that leaves one to feel rather uncomfortable, and certainly challenging to operate at your best given the sort of threats that you are reading about and the things that you're seeing in the office.
I was just thinking uncomfortable is a really nice word to describe, what people are feeling. I mean, folks are experiencing what I call, workforce PTSD. There, we have trauma-induced organizations now where people are unclear about, how the organization is going to function. How do they fit into it? How are they protected, as Elisa and Anthony had talked about? And so you have folks who were describing issues with chronic insomnia, uh, not just being confused about what they're supposed to do. They're talking about a loss of identity. Before I did this, I was known for this kind of work, and now I don't know what I'm really known for. Many people are talking about having, with the as a result of the reductions, really having to do the work of 2 or 3 people, and so they're feeling workload or work overload, and so it's just a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, and it's a lack of trust, unfortunately, in the organization. And then you have supervisors also who are having this trauma as well because they're still responsible, particularly your frontline supervisors, your middle level supervisors. They're feeling traumatized too because they're still being held accountable to get the work done. Yet they often don't have the kind of communications and clarity around what is the work and what are the deliverables, what are they being held accountable for, and then how do they communicate and support their people. And so this is really, it's a really unsettling environment. And when environments restructuring in the best of situations is always concerning people, because it's a fear: am I going to have a job? And if I have a job, what kind of job am I going to have? But this particular situation where employees have been faced with unrelenting issues, as Elisa and Anthony described, they went through the federal shutdown and just the ambiguity around, are they coming back to work and when? Some of the organizations have been really decimated with just a few people that are working. I was speaking with one federal employee and they had an organization of 200 people and now they had one of 25, but the workload had not shifted. And she talked about just going, just taking aspirins before she goes into the office because of the kind of stress level. Her blood pressure has gone up. And so it really is, the federal workers who felt really proud about what they did and how they did, and then their value to the American public are feeling like their reputations have been tarnished. And they're really feeling like, they've gotten a bad deal in all of this. Although they're working, for those that are still working, of course, they're dealing with survivor syndrome, feeling some of the guilt of, still being there while some of the people that they cared about are gone. Mm-hmm. And so it really is kind of a tough situation. But even with all of this, you still have our federal employees who going to work, trying to do the job and trying to deliver in situations that are pretty ambiguous.
Anthony, I'm curious. The administration has said that the changes that they have moved forward with, from the DRPs to the terminations, the other layoffs, that this was all in an effort to create greater efficiency within the federal government, that the government really should be operating almost like a private sector business by being sort of lean, mean, and highly responsive. And so I think that leads us to the question of the work. Is the work of the American people getting done in this sort of new reality amongst the federal workforce?
Well, what I can tell you about at least the agency where I work is that nothing that they've done with these RIFs has been efficient or effective. And that has come very clear in recent months with the restructuring. When you fire, such as they did at the FDA, over 600 employees, and those employees are doing a lot of the support work for other employees, it has a ripple effect across the agency. And right now, employees, as Dr. Weaver mentioned, are being asked to do the jobs of 2 or 3 people. Some don't have the same skills. This RIF was not done in any way efficient or effective. We saw some on stage with a chainsaw, and it was a chainsaw approach. It did not do anything to help the agency function more efficiently and effectively. And right now, we're seeing huge backlogs in work being done, for example, in HR functions within our agencies, because so many in that area were fired and they don't have people that they've replaced them with. And then there's contractors. They're now trying to contract out work, the very same work that federal employees were doing. So if the rationale was we don't need employees to do this work, why are agencies now contracting out to do the same work that employees were doing who they've unjustly fired.
And to your point, a lot of agencies are going back trying to rehire people, many who do not want to come back and take those roles.
Elisa, I'm curious, has there been any conversations at all to sort of engage the administration in sort of trying to work collaboratively on this? It appears that the administration has a very clear position in terms of the changes that they would like to see happen. Is there any sort of conversation of saying, okay, well, as opposed to fighting, maybe we can work with to sort of mitigate maybe issues and try to figure out reasonable compromise? Has there been any sort of conversations like that?
I can't speak to what the nationals conversations might be happening with the administration at any point. What I can say is that a lot of our members of Congress have different areas where they are focused on, and that many people, the unions, the locals themselves, are having conversations and trying to raise issues to help educate our legislators on how these problems are going to play out and how they're going to impact the public. Beyond that, it's really hard to say. The administration was quite clear. If you remember, Russell Vought said he wanted to traumatize federal workers. They never hid and never pretended in reality that that there was any part for working together and for collaboratively solving problems. They've never identified where these inefficiencies are and what they are. And so there's no place for people to come together and say that. But the other thing that I will add is we hear a lot about how the public sector is inefficient, without talking about what does it mean to provide public services and protection, and where does efficiency fall into that. And then we hear a lot about the private sector being more efficient than the public sector. I've had the good fortune of working in both sectors, and I know a lot of people who work in the private sector. And I wonder, if you ask your friends who work in the private sector, how efficient is your workplace? What they will say. And what if you ask them, are there things that people are doing? Are they making bad choices? Are they wasting money? Are they failing to take certain things into account? I think most people would agree. I think we're basing a lot of this conversation off of a shared myth that doesn't actually exist.
Well,
Add to that, if I can,
Yes,
that
please.
I can certainly tell you, since March, when the executive order came out, the agency or agencies have pretty much ignored unions. They have not wanted to work with federal employees to get our ideas. We're the ones who have worked at these agencies for years and would know how to best improve conditions, but the agencies have not been in any way interested in talking to employees since the executive order came out, and they've certainly ignored unions, ignored our contracts, refused to meet with us, and not been willing to talk to us at all.
And they recently put out that OPM, was it OPM or OMB? They recently put out a statement saying that if you have not sort of abided by those executive orders and canceled collective bargaining, that you should do that now. So it's even getting pushed to a further level where there are agencies that have the few agencies, right, that are still in fact talking to the union locals, have been told not to cancel collective bargaining, and they're, I think, setting up a type of reporting to ensure that the agencies that are not fully complying are in fact that they're aware of those agencies.
Elisa, you talked about sort of congressional support. There is a new caucus, a federal worker caucus that has been formed that sort of deals directly with this issue, led in part by Congressman Walkinshaw of Virginia. That committee, though, is made up of primarily Democrats with very few, if any, Republican representation on it. And so I wonder, sort of looking at that, sort of the congressional support that exists on Capitol Hill, are there Republicans that share your same concern about what the administration is doing and have any sort of stepped up to help the cause?
I think as a former local president, I have a perspective on that. As a current local president, I think Anthony might have the best perspective on that. So can I give him first?
Sure. Anthony, we'll throw you in the lines in here.
All right. Sure. I would say that there are some Republicans that are more aligned with stopping these changes that have occurred in the federal government. The Protect America's Workforce Act is the perfect example of that. It had bipartisan support. And these days, it's very hard to get bipartisan support on anything. But in the House of Representatives, the Protect America's Workforce Act passed with bipartisan support. It's now in the Senate, and we are urging the Senate to collectively, in a bipartisan fashion, pass that law, which would restore many collective bargaining rights, which would give employees some sense that they're not going to be penalized or retaliated against for political reasons when they're doing their jobs.
Do you feel that that law and the way in which it is written currently goes far enough to provide the sort of protections that you believe that federal workers are entitled to, given what has taken place over the last year?
Well, I would say absolutely not, that it doesn't go far enough, but there are ways where it can be improved upon. But it is definitely a first start and would be welcomed by unions if the Senate does pass that.
Elisa, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I think Anthony got it.
Okay.
I wanted to, I wanted
Dr.
to
Weaver?
say one, and I think one of the struggles has been that the public, the American public who benefits obviously from the work that occurs in our government agencies, still doesn't quite fully understand how all of this impacts them until there's a shutdown. And it seems to me, because there you asking the question, are there alliances? And I think that there needs to be even a much more aggressive attempts to pull the public in. I mean, we saw the power of Minnesota in terms of the public's reaction, and I think the public needs to really get it, because the media attention on this has died down, at least to me, with the exception of what we're doing on our channel. And so I'm not sure that the American public really understands what the it is in terms of its impact on them. And why is it in their self-interest to call their congressional member, to call their senator, and really, really ask for more support for the American worker and for the agencies. I mean, the worker is challenged, and those supervisors who are, I'm not talking necessarily about leadership, but I'm talking about those supervisors who have the day-to-day responsibility to make sure something gets done. They're struggling trying to figure out what to do. So I just think it needs to be a groundswell of attention by the American public, and an understanding by the American public of how this is hurting them and their families.
Anthony, has that sort of education been made clear to the American public? I think regionally, I think folks get it because a lot of federal workers are our neighbors, right? People that we fellowship with on a daily basis. But I think outside of the Beltway, outside of the region, it seems like it's a tougher sell.
I would definitely say that there's more work to be done there. During the shutdown, I think we did a really good job across the country in other places like Colorado and Florida and upstate, or the Northeast states, of educating the public on why the shutdown itself would impact their lives and what was not being done. And so similarly, I think, need to do that same job, for example, to tell the public why Schedule PC would harm them, giving, or I guess, having the concern of people, for example, reviewing food, drug, medical device applications and ingredients and saying, hey, I'm concerned about my job. And if I come back with a answer that is not politically acceptable, I could be fired for doing it. That's going to impact the work that is done to protect the food supply, to protect and make sure that products that people are putting in their bodies are safe and effective and won't harm them. And some other things that are going on at these agencies, like the push to use AI to do some review work for drugs and medical devices, things like that, that would certainly directly impact the public. And I don't think most people may use AI every day, but I don't think most people would want AI making decisions about what drugs should be approved that they're going to put in their bodies.
Elisa, I'm curious, how concerned are you about the long-term implications of the changes that we've seen within the federal workforce? I mean, from to Anthony's point, the changes that we've seen initiated by DOJ, some of the issues that have arisen from the work that DOJ has been participating in, the delays and sort of government efficiency, as some would say, in terms of actually getting work done. How concerned are you about the future?
I'm very concerned. I think we should be very concerned. The work that they're doing is very destructive. And the federal workers are holding it together as best as they can, but the pieces are sort of going to start falling apart at some point. At the same time, I never believed that I was an optimist, but it seems like this has brought out the optimist in me. I see the power and the strength and the expertise of the federal workers, and how focused they are. And I think that we are doing the work, and many others are doing the work to take this moment to really also think about how can we build a new administrative branch of government that works better, that serves the people better, and how can we make sure that the communities, the people who are actually receiving these services and these protections, and federal workers are leading the way in making sure that what we come up with next is better, so that out of destruction we can actually create something far better than we could have imagined.
And that's really important too for people to get involved and to try to work on change and improving the system, because the lack of involvement makes people feel more helpless and more hopeless. And so getting into the fight, looking at ways that they can improve the operational efficiencies in their own workplace, and also joining those organizations that are attempting to really make sure that the federal worker is protected and treated fairly. People standing up and being more involved is also a way of them being healthier and happier.
Anthony, do you feel like there's plenty of support out there, that folks are rallying behind unions to ensure their strength and that they're able to sort of carry out the work?
Yes, I think generally the public wants to help, wants to contribute, wants to find ways to get into this fight. I know that unions are working with organizations like Blacks in Government Incorporated and trying to get their members activated to help. I was just at a Black History Month, Happy Black History Month event yesterday at a church in DC, and some of the audience actually stood up and asked that question. I don't know what to do. They're angry, they're frustrated. How can I help? And immediately there were people there from different organizations that said that's one of the first things you can do. You can join an organization. It doesn't have to be a union if you can't join a union, but there are plenty of other organizations out here that are helping to push back against what's happening in our government, what's happening in changes to this from this administration that are harming working families. And so we encourage, whenever we see people, to join one of those organizations, lend your skills there, and also support us by coming out to events like rallies and other events in support of the federal workforce and the public services that we're providing.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, please.
Is that okay? I think so. It's important also, I think, for us to remember that a strong civil service is a real fundamental part of a stable and successful democracy. And I think that getting us collectively involved in speaking out to protect that strong civil service that we have had in our country and to come back to that is really important. So I think that collectively using our voices and the power of our voices through these different community groups, through our unions, through our faith communities, every way that we possibly can think of. We've seen throughout the history of this country how using our voices collectively has the power to change things that we thought were never possible. And I think that we are at one of those moments now. And while the civil service is not an exciting sort of thing to talk about, and people don't entirely maybe think about it because when it works well, it's been invisible. But I think this is one of those places where we can all really come together and speak out in so many different ways, and we can create a stronger civil service that will protect our democracy for a long time to come.
Dr. Weaver, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it really is about individuals standing up and getting involved, and I think it's also about supervisors within their sphere of control to start making a commitment to really create the kind of workplace for their particular team that allows for them to function more effectively. And that looks like being much more candid and open about communications. That's also training themselves and others to deal with and understand what a traumatized workplace looks like and feels like, and how do they handle that. It's also about establishing psychological safety so employees feel like there is some protection. So it's not always about what somebody else can do, but what are those things that supervisors can do within their sphere of influence to really create the kind of environment that allows for their people that report to them to feel more protected and more safe and more emboldened to do the work.
You can count on WUSA 9 to stay on top of the reductions to the federal workforce, those affected, and what it means for our communities. In the meantime, scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to a special section of WUSA9.com dedicated to our coverage of this story. And of course, we'll keep you updated right here on federal workforce fallout. We appreciate you being here. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.
You've learned a lot in life, on the job, in the military, raising a family. At Prince George's Community College, that experience can count as college credit. You could earn up to 15 college credits towards your degree just for what you already know. Eligible Prince George's County grads can even attend tuition-free with the Promise Scholarship. So, what's your game plan? Turn your journey into a degree at Prince George's Community College.